Balasa Cultural Services webinar today, The Portuguese Coast, the highlights from Santiago to Lisbon. And we are joined today by Marcy Foreman. She's the general manager and co-owner of Balasa Cultural Services. Balasa Cultural Services has been operating in Spain and Portugal and beyond since 1968, and both Marcy and co-owner Barbara Fulford are Americans, which makes Balasa uniquely qualified to cater to the needs of North Americans traveling to this region. Marcy is originally from Connecticut and is a graduate of the Cornell School of Hotel Administration. She started her career in the hotel business and also worked in other segments of the travel industry as a meeting planner, in travel agency sales, tour operation, and as general manager at American Airlines in Spain and Portugal. So for the past 30 years, she's lived in Spain, arranging custom programs and other luxury services for American individuals and groups through her company, Balasa Cultural Services. Marcy, welcome.
Thanks, Lee. So nice to be here. And hi, everybody. Thanks so much for joining me today. Balasa has been going for more than 50 years, thanks to our founder and president, Barbara Fulford, and of course, our wonderful team. Our bicultural and bilingual team serves top groups like the Smithsonian Institution, National Trust for Historic Preservation, Stanford and Harvard alumni, as well as several other prestigious organizations that you can see on our client list on our website, and of course, individuals and groups that come through travel advisors from Virtuoso and other agency groups, with an approximate ratio of 50-50 between groups and FIT clients in our company. We're very proud of our client list of both the groups as well as the agencies. And when you check out our website, I hope you'll give me feedback, since that is indeed a work in progress. And so I can't wait to hear your feedback. We began working in Portugal more than 40 years ago, making us by far the most experienced in this destination and its combined possibilities with Spain, obviously. Earlier this year, we completed advisor education for Spain-Portugal 101 on the most popular combined route from Seville to Lisbon. And we've also had the FAM last March for that route as well. And so here today, I will present you with the highlights of the 201 level, which is the second most popular combination of Spain and Portugal from the north, and also the focus for our FAM next March, for which we are accepting applications until September 30th. As the 201 level implies, this regional education of northern Spain and Portugal highlights is normally best for the most experienced or specialized advisors who have already been to Spain, thereby giving this remote region a context both culturally and experientially. This region is not usually the first trip to Spain, but rather a second trip or a theme trip following a particular special interest. So we begin this cross-border journey in the city of Santiago de Compostela, especially since my first pointer is always to begin your regional journey in Spain and end in Portugal for that combined cultural, historical, gastronomic, and wine experience. The culture and styles of hospitality between the countries make this the most desirable order whenever possible. Start in Spain and in Portugal. And there you saw the cathedral. Santiago de Compostela is the capital of the autonomous community of Galicia. Autonomous region of Galicia has two official languages which are widely used. First, I would say that Spain has 5 official languages. And so in Galicia, you have the native Galician called Gallego, which is a Romance language that's closely related to Portuguese. And they share in common Galician Portuguese medieval literature as well as Old Style Spanish. And so you have a little more than half of the population, 56% of the population, speaks Galician always or almost always, while only 42% of this region speak Castilian Spanish always or almost always. You can see the picture here of the Parador of Santiago, across the square from Santiago's cathedral and a historic monument in its own right. This is where we arrange special lunches for our Voyages groups, as well as other small groups that we arrange in company with local musicians or dancers, or the special incantation flaming drink called queimada. Galicia in the northwest Spain, same as Extremadura region in southwest Spain. These are regions off the beaten path and largely unknown by American visitors, but of course authentic and incredibly historic areas to visit, both of them. While the southwest region of Extremadura boasts Roman ruins, ham and cheeses, and loads of history about the American discoverers, the northwest region of Galicia is most attractive for history buffs, garden lovers, and of course seafood lovers, as you'll see in a minute. Santiago de Compostela is a city full of charm and mysticism, and indeed it's the capital of the root of mystic Spain. You see here traditional pictures of some of the typical pilgrims, as well as the photo on the right of the queimada mystical drink, flaming drink, and of course the amazing Botafumeiro demonstration at the cathedral on the bottom. UNESCO describes it as the famous pilgrimage site in northwest Spain that became a symbol of the Spanish Christian struggle against Islam. The cathedral was destroyed by the Muslims at the end of the 10th century and was completely rebuilt in the following century with Romanesque, Gothic, and Baroque touches. Ancient legends say this was the place where the souls of the deceased gathered to undertake the path toward the sea following the run of the sun at sunset. In the cathedral's crypt stores the mortal remains of the Apostle James the Zebedee, also known as Saint James, the great patron of Spain, and it adorns this country as Santiago or San Jacobi or Santiago. In fact, the Golden Legend says Saint James the Great, after Jesus' death, embraced his evangelization work through France and Spain on up to Galicia. Here pictured, you see the Botafumeiro, which is the largest church thurible in the world. And this incense burning is loved by all pilgrims that undertake the Camino pilgrimage as their ending visit. So the many routes of St. James, here you have a map of all the different ways that you can take the route of St. James. This is a 400 plus mile long path that should in theory be completed in 1 month. And the way, as it's called, crosses France and Spain most traditionally, even though there is an alternative path called the Portuguese Way, which starts off in Lisbon and goes up to Santiago. The pilgrims that wanted to reach Santiago had many options, obviously, in terms of their routes. Pilgrims came from all over Europe following the Camino de Santiago to reach the city born around the Holy Tomb, exercising a great influence on the surrounding area. This is seen in all of the small towns, churches, hospitals, and monasteries that were built near the Camino to attend to the thousands of pilgrims who came to visit the tomb. This influence in the local architecture, mostly Romanesque, was especially strong and long-lasting in the northwest of Spain, in Galicia. But the fame and the reputation of the sanctuary of Santiago de Compostela went well beyond. In fact, Galicia was even known in the Nordic sagas as Jacob's land. More than 200,000 pilgrims travel to the city each year from points all over Europe and other parts of the world, in addition to the holy years when we see more people coming in. So the most sophisticated of Spain's many regional cuisines is almost always found in the northern half of Spain, and Galicia is no disappointment. The shellfish, mussels, octopus, and more are the best in Spain, besides, of course, Madrid, which is known as the largest port in Spain, receiving deliveries from every port every day. In addition to the fish and the shellfish and the different traditions in Galicia, it's also very well known for Albarino wine, which is actually a Portuguese grape, and it competes with Spain's Verdejo wine as one of the two most popular white wines in Spain these days. So finally, a word about gardens in Galicia. Just wow. We at Valesa have arranged very specialized garden trips to Spain and Portugal for several American botanical garden societies, which you'll see on our client list. And so you can ask us to design a specialized program for your local organizations. Here you have photos of two amazing and representative historic gardens within 30 to 40 minutes drive of Santiago. So they're gardens by historic homes, but the homes are not furnished and not open to be visited. We go there exclusively to visit the gardens. Really beautiful. So where to stay in and around Santiago? I've already shown you the photo of the Parador, which is across the square from Santiago's cathedral and right in the middle of Santiago's old town. This is clearly the premier spot to stay, especially if you can avoid those tiniest rooms that were cells. And of course, it's the first hotel in our upcoming FAM to this region next March. So at Valesa, we always strive to find you the most authentic spots with a sense of place and good service. My degree from the Cornell Hotel School guarantees my level of picky, so it's worth noting that in the more remote areas and smaller destinations, it can be very typical to have a nice local hotel, but not necessarily a world-class operation. And so here you've got a photo of a lovely little parador in Bayona, which is on the coast near Santiago, also within the hour. 4-star level of service, like most of the paradors, but a 5-star location, of course. It's romantic, it's a beautiful view, and a very nice, simple place to stay. Clients must have a car and driver or be driving in order to stay at this location. And Valesa, of course, has contracts with both Paradores of Spain as well as Posadas de Portugal. So another option for staying near Santiago is this historic and famous spa called La Toja, famous and popular among Spaniards only, really. My colleague Nuria in our office recently inspected this property, and so feel free to ask us for her inspection report or her take on the place in case that would be appropriate for your clients. We never recommend a hotel that we have not inspected personally. So now we cross over into northern Portugal as we head south from Santiago. The drive time from Santiago is just 2 hours into the Minho area, or 2.5 hours if you want to drive straight until Porto. So as we go into the Minho region, you'll find it most impressive for the natural and ancient beauty that you find over most of northern Portugal. And it's just home to very friendly people, and you're surrounded by monasteries and farms and little vineyards and things like that, where you can always count on a rendezvous with nature, history, traditional flavors, and friendly people. This is what's so special about this area. Our first interest when we came here was to complete our Portuguese wine touring, this being the part of the Vinho Verde route. Vinho Verde route celebrated in 2008 100 years of this special demarcation. These wines are loved for their acidity and their subtle carbonation and lower alcohol, making them really a great choice for summer. In fact, Vinho Verde is sometimes translated as green wine, even though it's never green but normally white. There are a few reds and rosés, but they're normally white. Those are less common. Green can also mean in Spanish or Portuguese that the wine is young, and indeed these wines are often released with just 3 to 6 months after harvest. But the truth is that Vinho Verde is simply the name of this geographic region, since it's part of a very green northern Portugal and home to so many different types of wine in this demarcated region. Inside Portugal, we find Vinho Verde on every menu and in every supermarket, even though its relatively recent boom outside the country is thanks to them starting to use more modern production methods and therefore being able to produce more. Most of this region is made up of small growers who work together in local cooperatives, although houses like Aveleda are one of the large exceptions that we would work with in this area. And a special word about wine tourism in Portugal in general. Portuguese grapes can be an extremely confusing subject even for wine experts. With more than 250 grape varieties being used in Portugal, and many of them indigenous to the country also, this is almost double the number of grape varieties being used in Spain. Ask us to arrange your possible introduction to our favorite Portuguese wines and the regions in order for your clients to really get a better understanding of the different regional wines, and you can have this experience in different locations around the country. So Portuguese food for me is more homey and heavy than the neighboring cuisine in Spain, though it's great to taste the many specialties via small tapas bites, which they call petiscos in Portugal. We offer petiscos tours in Porto, and especially our favorite one in Lisbon. And here you also have a picture of the cheeses that are especially varied and excellent around the country, though my personal favorite is farther down south in the Aceitão area. We'll get to that later. Fish lovers will also be really happy in Portugal, with the best and freshest fish being served along this wild Atlantic coast. We offer cooking classes all over the Iberian Peninsula, and especially with fresh fish here in Portugal, a lot of people like to learn their preparations of the fish. And we can even offer a possibility of fishing and cooking on the road in Portugal with wheels. So Portugal's traditional sweets, the most famous one being the pastéis de Belém, these famous custard tarts. These are loved by kids of all ages, whether it be to visit a traditional bakery and just taste them all, or to actually have a demonstration with a bit of participation on how to make the tarts. And of course, tasting these and other Portuguese sweets as you go. Fun, tasty, sweet with history. Doesn't get better than that. So following the path southward from Minho, we get to the medieval town of Guimarães, considered the birthplace of Portugal. This is an easy day trip and must-see for history lovers coming from Porto as well. UNESCO says the historic town of Guimarães is associated with the emergence of the Portuguese national identity in the 12th century, an exceptionally well-preserved and authentic example of the evolution of a medieval settlement into a modern town. Specifically, it shows the development of Portuguese architecture from the 15th to the 19th centuries. So quite interesting and really fascinating history. Then nearby from Guimarães is the Bom Jesus Sanctuary, half hour from Guimarães and also within easy reach of Porto. Normally that full day excursion would include Guimarães and Bom Jesus. You reach the sanctuary by foot, by car, or by vertical tram in an impressive piece of 19th century engineering. This was the first of its kind to be installed in Portugal in 1882 and continues to use its water-powered system to power up the 300-meter slope in just 3 minutes. The stairway leading to the top contains 17 landings adorned with symbolic fountains and statues and other Baroque-style decoration. So finally, we arrived to the city of Porto, also known as O Porto in English. Porto lies on the Douro River, just 2 miles from the river's mouth at the Atlantic Ocean, or 175 miles north of Lisbon. Porto is chiefly famous for its export of the wine named for it, a popular fortified wine usually served after meals. A sizable proportion of the population is engaged in manufacturing, and fisheries and tourism are also important. And just like 20 minutes northwest of Porto is where you find the artificial port of Lesões, which is where the cruise companies come in with the cruise lines, and that's why it's about a 20-minute transfer into the city from there when you do your excursions. So more of our favorite sites in the historical center of Porto, including the bookstore made famous by the Harry Potter books, and the Salon Árabe in the Bolsa Historic Monument. These are all in the old quarter of Porto. The Douro River is spanned in central Porto by several famous bridges, notably the Dom Luís the first bridge, which was built from 1881 to 85 by a disciple of Gustave Eiffel, and then also the Maria Pia Bridge, which was designed by Eiffel himself in 1876. And regarding water travel on the Douro River, we do offer pre and post programs around Spain and Portugal for passengers from AMA Waterways on the Douro, as well as the other companies. Although we definitely have a preference for seeing this area and visiting the wineries in this area called quintas by car. You get to see a lot more and do a lot more in a day if you're seeing it by car. So this is why we work with several private yachts or these historic Rabello boats in order to arrange overnight journeys as short as 2 hours and as long as 3 days on these yachts or Rabellos in order to have your taste on the river and either just enjoy the river on its own or arrange it with a lunch on board or a wine tasting on board, or even 3 days with overnight stay for small groups if you do want to do it privately on the river. We like to do a day on the river and then see the rest by car if possible. Here's some more of the lovely Douro views. This is a really great and relaxing area with lovely and passionate people who just love what they do. Some of our favorite visits near the Douro include the gardens at the Solar de Matus, the town of Lamego, and one of our most exclusive cooking classes is near here as well. And of course, here you have pictures of the favorite hotel on the river, Six Senses, who we're fortunate enough to include in our upcoming 201 FAM for next March. We're very grateful for their support. In fact, they are clearly the favorite for our top clients, even though you should know that there are less expensive boutique options for the more modest budgets. Continuing south along the Portuguese coast, we have many options to visit. The first most important stop is the town of Coimbra, home to historic university and also its own school of fado music. So the University of Coimbra was Portugal's first university and among the first in Europe. It was actually founded in Lisbon by Dom Dinis in 1290, and then it settled in Coimbra in 1537. And it attracts a stream of teachers, artists, and intellectuals from across Europe forever. Fado is traditional folk music, that's very popular, and it can be melancholy by nature, includes instruments like guitars and mandolins, and usually one fadista singing very poetic lyrics related to the darker elements of love or death or sadness. The roots of fado can be traced back to the early 1800s, and it originated in Portugal. Fado was actually added to the UNESCO's Intangible Cultural Heritage List in 2011. And there's two types of fado, as I think I kind of mentioned before. There's one in Lisbon and there's one in Coimbra. The style that we hear in Lisbon is the most popular style, while Coimbra is a more classic style. As we continue south from Coimbra, we find a myriad of options to stop along the route to Lisbon, including Fatima, which many clients ask about, but few are prepared for such crowds, so be forewarned. The monasteries of Batalha and Alcobaça, which we find to be very worthwhile visits, and the towns of Caldas da Rainha, as well as the former fishing village of Nazaré, are also wonderful stops for lunch or just a quick stop along the way when you're on this route. We also like to stop at our favorite winery on the way here for a bit of tasting and even a light tapas lunch here if you just want to go quickly and continue on your route. And then finally, we come to the charming historic town of Óbidos. This is a medieval town that's one of the most picturesque and well preserved in Portugal. Óbidos is located on high ground near the Atlantic coast, giving it a strategic importance in the territory. It had already been settled prior to the Romans' arrival on the Iberian Peninsula, and the town prospered even more after being chosen by the royal family. King Dinis offered it to his wife, Queen Isabel, in the 13th century, and so it became part of the Queen's estate, Casa das Reinas, and so it was continually improved and enriched throughout various dynasties. Really beautiful town. And as we continue south from Óbidos, we reach the town of Mafra. And here you have a picture of the National Palace of Mafra, which is probably the most striking Baroque monument to be found in Portugal. Its construction symbolizes the absolutist rule of Dom João V. The palace has some 1,200 rooms, which of which the most impressive are the library, dating from the 18th century and containing some 36,000 books and manuscripts. In addition, we have the convent, which is an important and significant part of the religious heritage of Portugal. But the most stunning feature of the palace is actually the basilica, considered to be a masterpiece of Baroque architecture and famed for its carillon, famous throughout the world for its sheer size and beauty of this mechanism. So still farther south of Mafra, less than a half hour from Lisbon, we come to the town of Sintra. UNESCO says of this cultural landscape that in the 19th century, Sintra became the first center of European Romantic architecture. Ferdinand II turned a ruined monastery into a castle where this new sensitivity was displayed in the use of Gothic, Egyptian, Moorish, and Renaissance elements in the creation of these parks blending local and exotic species. This creation of the unique combination of parks and gardens with the town influenced the development of landscape architecture throughout Europe. So here you have a lovely street shot in the town of Sintra, where I have found some of the best crafts and at decent prices of all of Portugal. I always walk away with something from here, whether it's cork or jewelry or wine or ceramics. The Palacio Nacional of Sintra, which you saw in the previous slide, is the best preserved medieval royal palace in Portugal and was a favorite with the Portuguese nobility. The palace's long history has been intertwined with the fortunes of Portugal's ruling nobility, who resided here from the early 15th to the 19th centuries, making it Portugal's most lived-in royal palace. This visit for us is the most Portuguese representation of history, and their tile works are amazing. And so when forced to choose one of the palaces in Sintra, for us it's a no-brainer to go to the National Palace. Whereas the Pena Palace on the top of the mountain has long lines, lots of crowds, and it's not even very Portuguese. So we really normally just prefer from the outside to comment anything that's interesting about that palace. So additionally, in Sintra, the gardens are beautiful examples of the international and mystic influences brought to this wealthy area, making Sintra actually more than a one-day visit to see it all. Here we have our two favorite hotels on the Sintra coastline, especially the Tivoli Seteais in Sintra, with its 19th century English decor and hospitality, and the extra bonus of the spa and views, and our wonderful relationship with Tivoli too. Continuing along Sintra's coastline, which I love to visit, offers loads of activities, including being on the beach, horseback riding, bike riding, etc. This is the westernmost coast of Europe. And here you're looking at views of Cascais town, which is just really charming. Cascais and Estoril are the most famous towns on this coastline, with Estoril as the most famous, with history going back to James Bond 007, the glory days of the casino, the performing musicians, and famous golfing events that are often found in Estoril all through the 20th century. Both towns are wonderful. Another worthwhile visit in this area and open on Mondays is the Queluz Palace and Gardens, which we visit mainly for the gardens. Queluz is a beautiful national palace that served as the official royal residence during the 18th century, while the Mad Queen Dom Maria was hid away from public view. This fascinating palace is located partway between Lisbon and Sintra, and that means that it's often overlooked by tourists because, again, Sintra is more than a one-day visit. But those who visit Queluz will be rewarded with an exquisite Baroque palace that has this intriguing history. The queen started to exhibit her madness the year that Dom Pedro died in 1786, and then this got worse with the death of her older son by smallpox in 1788. She was later confined to Maria's pavilion there and kept away from public view, but her insane screams would echo throughout the palace. The National Palace of Queluz and its historic gardens are one of the most remarkable examples of the harmonious link between landscape and palatial architecture in Portugal. So in the gardens, don't miss the surprising Canal dos Azulejos, the tiled ceramic canal, completely decorated with typical 18th century scenes. Really beautiful. So while my favorite wines in Portugal are in the nearby Alentejo region, we do certainly have a favorite winery near Sintra, Casal Santa Maria, with the most unique and romantic winery story of all time. Do not miss this very special visit by the sea. Really family run and wonderful. So finally we arrive in Lisbon. You can see how the route that we just covered could easily take 10 days before we even get to Lisbon. And this area on its own can fill another 4 or 5 days easily. Here you have a map of the Lisbon area, just in order to get a closer view of the different options. Okay, so Lisbon is one of the oldest cities in Western Europe. After the region was settled by the Celts, it was then founded by the Phoenicians. They established a settlement called Ulisipo, which was then conquered by the Greeks and Carthaginians. In 205 BC, the Romans won the Second Punic War against the Carthaginians and occupied the city, calling it Olisipo. Ancient Lisbon was integrated into the Roman province of Lusitania, but when the Roman Empire collapsed, it was invaded by Germanic tribes and was controlled by the Kingdom of the Suebi until 585. Jumping forward, from the 15th century onward, the port of Lisbon became one of the most important ones in the world. And then beyond that, in 1755, Lisbon suffered a terrible earthquake that destroyed a large part of the city. The first Marquis of Pombal used the riches from Brazil that they had obtained in their voyages to rebuild the Lisbon Baixa district with its large classical avenues after that. The city was then invaded by Napoleon in 1807, but then it was recaptured by the British under General Wellington. In 1833, the constitutional monarchy was reinstated, and it endured until the Republic was declared in 1910. After the First Republic ended in 1926, the anti-democratic Conservative Party took power, installing the dictator Salazar, and his regime would last until 1974. Today, Lisbon has a population of almost 3 million people, ranking it number 11 in the European Union for population, although it's the largest urban space in the Union in terms of the city space. And just 5% of Portugal's total population is here in Lisbon. So you can see most people are still living in the outlying areas. Lisbon is very popular right now, thanks to the mix of history, safety, friendliness, and tastiness, that it just seems to have it all. Last year, the number of passengers arriving by plane rose by 5%, and by cruise 11%, with almost 3 million foreigners spending the night here. So here you have a picture of Jerónimos Monastery, which is the most must-see monument in Lisbon. It was declared UNESCO World Heritage in 1983, and it's located in the Belém neighborhood next to the Tagus River. This grand religious building was historically associated with the early sailors as explorers, as it was here that Vasco da Gama spent his last night before his voyage to the Far East. Construction began in 1501 and wasn't completed until the 17th century. The building is predominantly Manueline style, which is Portuguese late Gothic, and the church houses the tombs of the Vasco da Gama and also Luís de Camões, a famous Portuguese poet. Do not miss the monastery's cloister, which is a two-story breathtaking cloister, not to be missed. Tasting or learning to make these wonderful custard tarts, and of course learning the history of Portugal through its tiles, for us are two focuses that we love to bring home to people who come to Lisbon. You can visit the Tile Museum, and we also offer tile making sessions in several different locations for clients who want to learn about all the traditional styles and even how to make one of their own. Here you have some more pictures of Lisbon. The markets, the street art, and the exquisite gardens and decorative arts are all quite memorable here in Lisbon. And of course, the specialty shops include cork products, since Portugal is the largest producer of cork in the world. It's sustainable, waterproof, and expensive, and I love it. And the best cork shops are actually nearby in Sintra town. So a quick word about the hotels in Lisbon. We always recommend from personal experience, as I mentioned before. And so we need to know your client's mobility issues and their quantity of driver services before we can really give you the best recommendations for your client here in Lisbon. There is no perfect hotel, and we have excellent relationships with both 4- and 5-star options, both boutique and spa properties. But Lisbon is very spread out over several different hills, and so many of the best options are not walking distance to the Chiado or Baixa districts, but rather taxis or drivers that are not expensive in Lisbon. So if you like to walk everywhere and be central on a main avenue to feel safe, then we really do love the hospitality of the Tivoli Avenida best these days. But we also love bringing you to the Bairro Alto in the Old Quarter if they want a boutique property. The Tivoli Avenida is a curious place because it looks kind of like a Hilton, but it really feels like family in its hospitality. That's why we love them. So a half hour to the south of Lisbon, here you have Arrábida Mountains. This is Portugal's version of the Amalfi Coast, but without the crowds and half the price. There is difficult hiking available here, as well as wonderful food and wine activities as well. Here you have the fishing town of Setúbal, and this is actually where one of our favorite food markets in Portugal is located. A very charming visit, not to be missed. And just outside of Setúbal is the amazing hotel and restaurant called Casa Palmela. This is a historic conversion with a soul, run by an aristocratic family with history and passion and the best hospitality you can encounter in this region. Here we arrange our favorite introduction to the best Portuguese wines with an unforgettable gourmet lunch by their talented chef and their sommelier, not to be missed. So after Casa Palmela, we love to visit our favorite tile studio to learn the traditional processes and designs, and even arrange making our own tiles too. And of course, now you can see my favorite cheese from this region, the aceitao cheese. To the east of Lisbon, we have the Alentejo region, all within an hour and a half drive from the city. Here you have the town of Arreolos, which I'm saying poorly, but for you to understand. This is known for its historic rug production, where you can still see it happening and learn the history behind it. And as we continue into the Alentejo region, we come to the UNESCO World Heritage town of Évora, also found on the original Spain-Portugal 101 route from Seville to Lisbon. This UNESCO World Heritage City has a rich history and unique cultural roots that date back to Roman times. During the 1400s, it was the residence of the King of Portugal, and the city thus benefited from the royal court's influence. Évora's character was cemented during the 17th and 18th centuries as the preservation of its history made Évora a must-visit town on any trip. And this was a place of wealth and influence because Lisbon had just been destroyed by the earthquake in 1755. So here is actually where you'll find some of the country's richest medieval architecture still standing. And don't miss the Bone Chapel visit, called La Capella dos Ossos, which is one of the best known monuments in Évora. This is a small interior chapel located next to the entrance of the Church of St. Francis, where the interior walls are covered and decorated with human skulls and bones. We work with several hotel properties in this area too, from the posadas to the more luxury options. Here again, as in Sintra, you can visit for a day from Lisbon, or you can actually spend a few days, which is what we most recommend for this area, especially for clients who like to get into the country. So the Alentejo region of Portugal is also home to the largest cork forests in the world, where many species of plants and animals, including the rare Iberian lynx, are protected. Alentejo, which is literally the land beyond the Tagus, is a warm, dry, mostly gentle region just north of the Algarve, and it has been ignored by all but few in terms of visitors. A long history of turbulence means that many of these towns are on hilltops, not just Évora, but the medieval village of Montserrat, right on the Spanish border, is also on a hilltop because they were always defending the region. So the 235-year Whistler cork oak from Alentejo was named the European Tree of the Year in 2018 after gathering 26,000 votes of the 200,000 votes cast from 13 candidate trees from other countries around Europe. The Whistler cork oak is named after the sound of the countless birds that perch on its branches. The bark of the trees has been stripped more than 20 times since it was planted in 1783. Portugal is actually the world's leading cork producer, accounting for 60% of the volume of world exports, and it has an area of cork oak corresponding to 25% of the area that exists worldwide. The vast majority of this is made into wine bottles, obviously, into wine stoppers, obviously, but increasingly, cork is being sold to the construction and fashion industries and even to the space industry. As well as being great for storing the wine, it's also good for sound and heat insulation, and it's being used increasingly for soundproofing materials in floor tiles, also used for all sorts of accessories, handbags, purses, wallets, mouse mats, iPad covers, shoes, even furniture, as well as woodwind instruments and inside baseballs. And the best thing about cork, aside from being a good earner for Portugal, is that it's sustainable. The trees aren't cut down or damaged when the cork is harvested, and they can be harvested every 9 years for the lifetime of the tree, which is roughly 270 years. To cut down a cork tree in Portugal, you actually need a permit from the Portuguese Ministry of Agriculture, since that would be illegal otherwise. Clients like to visit cork farms and learn the process and sometimes buy the cork products as well. So here you have pictures of some of the villages around the Alentejo. These are fun and authentic, and even nearby one of Europe's largest man-made lakes for water activities in the summer. A lot of things to do in this countryside. And so one and all, this is our presentation of the highlights from Santiago to Lisbon, mainly along the coast, or at least very nearby. I hope you enjoyed and learned, and we can assist you and your clients in this lovely and under-discovered region that enjoys great access by air or train or car or boat. And here is our contact information, though you can also find us on Facebook and other social media to be found on our website.
Marcy, thank you so much. What a fabulous presentation. Many people are asking for the replay. And yes, everyone, we definitely will get that to you along with the 101 that Marcy mentioned. So you'll have that along with the other so that you can get a full picture. So let me start by asking some of the questions, presenting those to Marcy. Marcy, where is the traditional starting place for the Camino?
The original traditional starting place for the Camino was in Roncesvalles by the Pyrenees on the French side. Uh, but since we started that with Smithsonian many years ago, even they started shortening the Camino because starting from France was longer and more difficult to go through the Pyrenees. So these days it normally begins on the Spain side, and good starting points could be Pamplona, could be starting in Madrid and then going up to Burgos, or could be starting in Bilbao and then going inland to Burgos in order to do the interior route, which we find to be the most monumental, as opposed to the coastal route.
Okay, thank you so much. There was a comment. It says Mafra's convent tower appears to be under restoration. Noticed some scaffolding in the picture. Is that still going on or completed?
No, I think that picture is old, although truth be told, they are always having to restore these monuments. They take really great care of these national monuments, but I don't think it's under restoration now.
Mm-hmm. Okay, good. Thank you. So when do you suggest the best time of year to travel this route?
If we're talking about hiking the route of St. James, I would tell you that Spaniards and Europeans come most frequently in the summer because that's their typical vacation time. And if you go to northern Spain and Portugal, it's certainly not too hot to do that. But I think that personally, I would prefer the months of June or September as being the ideal months. And most of our clients are doing it spring or fall, to be sure.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you. You mentioned a little bit during your presentation about understanding mobility needs. So, in general, how wheelchair friendly is Portugal?
I don't think that Spain or Portugal are extremely wheelchair friendly. I think that we are accustomed to making arrangements for wheelchair bound clients. Um, but I do think that these older cities with their cobblestones, with their hilltop towns making for inclines, with the difficult hiking, with the steps on the sidewalks and the uneven surfaces, I do think um, that it's just a question of planning for whatever your mobility level is. The cities in Europe are generally not automatically ready for those kind of needs. So I guess medium in preparation. The hotels are prepared though. They're all making wheelchair guest rooms to be available for that.
Hmm. Okay, thank you. Well, speaking of hotels, for the Camino, do you arrange the hotels along the way since most most of what you would find would be hostels?
Um, Not only do we arrange the hotels along the way, but that is the only way that we will handle the route of St. James. We do it in a more luxury way where they come and they have a driver moving their luggage and they can call the driver to come pick them up when they're tired, etc. But the only way that we would plan a region like that would be as the entire package together. And of course, we're not really doing the inexpensive hiking tours, but rather this more luxury approach to it, the way we started with the Smithsonian. So some of them are hostels and some of them are not, but we go about as luxury as can be done on that route.
Mm. Okay, thank you. So, what would you say? What is a major comparison between posadas and paradors?
Okay, so that's a really good question. Posadas and paradors are these government run inns. The employees are government employees. And the ones that are most famous and that clients normally know about are the historic conversion properties that they do, but not all of their properties are historic in Spain or Portugal. And so we clearly have our small collection of favorites in the Paradors and our small collection of favorites within the Posadas. And those are normally the more historic properties and the ones with the best locations. So I would say we use less than half of each of those hotel groups, but they are lovely because they are historic conversions. So some of them we really adore. And Santiago is perhaps the star in the Paradors chain. And so it'll be exciting that we're staying there the first night of the FAM.
Hmm. Okay, I have a couple of questions about Vallessa and doing business with Vallessa. So for Vallessa, everything is everything custom made for the client?
Exactly. We don't have anything canned. We don't have anything pre-made. We do only tailor making in this office. And so when we ask you our questions, we need answers in order to give you good feedback. If you don't give us feedback about the clients, we can't help you wow them. Obviously, we are working with budgets of 5,000 euros to 50,000 euros, and we have clients with all sorts of different special interests. And so we absolutely only tailor, and this is why we ask questions and we need answers to our questions when you want to start working with us for a client. Typically, the questions are limited to the trip budget, the special interests of the client, and their preferred hotel style. And normally with that and the number of days, we can in one day revert with a tailored trip outline for us to use as a basis of discussion. But we really do need the questions answered because we only tailor.
Hmm. Okay, thank you. And since you tailor, I suppose you can do special interests. We had a question here about some Jewish touring, and I assume you can do that?
Yes, in fact, we took the Jewish Museum in New York to Barcelona, and we have two Jewish people on our staff here, so the sympathies are here as well. And so we have a lot of knowledge on this subject and happy to include Jewish heritage touring wherever people are interested in both countries.
All right, very good. And then if an agent wanted some materials, brochures or pictures to post on their Facebook page or something of that sort, how would they go about receiving materials?
Yeah, they normally send an email request and explain what they're trying to put together or promote, and that way we can send the information that each organization needs, and again, not be canned, but just specifically for that organization.
Hmm.
No problem.
Yep. Okay, good. So the FAM in March, there is information. There are questions about that. I know we will include that in the follow-up email. But how would one go about getting more information?
Right, good question. So this summer, we sent out a save the date, and people started sending applications for the FAM. The FAM in March is scheduled for March 1 to 10, and we are now receiving applications, and we will receive them until September 30th, after which we will announce the participants within the month of October. So typically you would write to our company email address, which is up on the screen, and you would say, I'm interested in this FAM. Can you send me an application? And that's how you get the ball rolling.
All right, very good. Thank you.
Hmm.
A couple of other questions that we had here, and then we can, I think, wrap it up. So the presentation today, if someone wanted to do this area for the first time, do you recommend a car and driver, or is this something that you could arrange and they can do on own?
There is no question that the best way to make the most of your time and the most of our really talented guides is to use our guides as much as possible and to use drivers where it's needed. Um, most of our top clients are using drivers and guides throughout, and so in 10 days they're actually learning a month's worth of education. But when we're doing some of the city tours, we're always willing to cut back on the driver's side and put in taxis when it's appropriate. We just feel it's so important for you to meet our really talented guides. And some of our drivers are so talented that you could almost call them driver guides, even though we don't hire driver guides. For us, these are two separate jobs.
Mhm. All right, thank you. I hope
Great
I don't
drivers too.
yeah.
Yeah. Mm.
Okay, so I hope I don't pronounce incorrectly. The Pina Palace, is that correct?
At Pena Palace in Sintra.
Pena. Okay,
Hmm.
and since is there what is there to see inside the palace?
It's just another palace, this one more Germanic in influence. And so there's some furniture, but it's not really, for us, we're not going to take you to Sintra to visit two palaces in the morning, because then it's not enough time to see the coast, to see the town, to see the shops, to stop for other things that you want to see on that coast. So you have to choose one. And Pena Palace is both filled with crowds and lines and the least Portuguese of the two options. And since we're all about all things Spanish and Portuguese, for us it's a very obvious choice.
Hmm.
The
All
National
right.
Palace over the Pena Palace.
Okay.
But
Thank
you
you. Well,
can learn the story about it from the outside from our guides.
oh, okay, good.
Hmm.
All right. Well, I'm going to stop there, Marcy, and I will turn it back to you for closing comments.
Oh gosh, I don't know what else to say. I am so happy that everyone joined us for the webinar and that Portugal is starting to see more and more interest so that it's not just about Lisbon and Porto, and it combines just so naturally with Spain if they have enough time or a particular interest that ties them together, like wine touring. And so I hope that you will contact us and start brainstorming for your clients who have seen other parts of Europe, either for gardens or wine touring or history, and be able to brainstorm something special for your client that maybe is not on their radar. We know that Spain and Portugal are secondary destinations, but lots of people have been to Italy many, many times, and they're ready for something new perhaps. And so we hope you'll contact us about that.
Well,
Thank you.
thank you, Marcy. Everyone, thank you so much for being with us. We will be in touch by email with all of the information that we promised, and we appreciate your time today. And with that, we will say good day and conclude the webinar. Goodbye, everyone.
Thank you.